Arthur Lam from Monart Live, and welcome. On a regular basis, we'll be inviting special guests and help us to unpack life, the life of abundance and life of manifesting. And also today, we'll be having a special guest with you. Should you wish to follow our recordings, then please subscribe to this channel. Thank you again for participating, and I'm looking forward to take you on a journey of life. A wonderful day. This is Arthur Lam from Monart Live, and today is actually my first guest, okay, here online with me in Monart's live conversation. And the gentleman as a guest, his name is Peter Nicholls, and Peter Nicholls is a life enjoyment mentor. And I took a little extract, just a little bit, to introduce yourself from your About Me page on your website, Peter. So before I hand over the word to you, okay, let me read this for our listeners today. I was 30 years of age, staring out of my office window, and was thinking 35 years of this with a big question mark. I wondered, and then my pension, and that's my life done. I passionately wanted the reason to live beyond simply earning a fortnightly salary. On weekends, I had the purpose as a respected sports administrator. And on weekdays, I was working simply to earn money. Wow. Yeah. Welcome to Peter. And I know we'll unpack a little bit about your professional career and of course about your life enjoyment mentor, but thank you for coming. Now, just for our listeners, is that we've only met a couple of times at some of the business network events, but we've never really had a coffee or a cup of tea, okay? And I suppose a real meeting or in-depth conversation is right here, right now. So again, I want to thank you. And
my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Today, for our listeners, what we'll be leading into is his book he's just launched, is Free to Be Me. And I'm sure that we'll unpack that during our conversation. So thank you. So, but if I may ask you, Peter, you're an Adelaidean, you're based in Adelaide, South Australia. Have you always been in Adelaide, South Australia?
No, I haven't. I'm a Johnny come lately. I came here in 1976. Okay. I was born in Sydney.
Yes.
Dad got moved to Melbourne when I was a very small child. So I grew up in Melbourne. And I began work in Melbourne and worked there for about 7 years after I'd left school. And then for various reasons, I finished up deciding to go to Canberra. I was in the Commonwealth government in Melbourne, and everything at that time was moving to Canberra. So I decided to get in before I was told to go. And so I spent 12 years in Canberra and then came to Adelaide. And in those stages, lots of things happened, which we'll dive into perhaps as we go along.
Thank you for that brief introduction as well. But so you're a mate in Sydney, raised in Melbourne, and started your working career in Canberra, and that was for a government department.
I started my career in Melbourne. I worked there for 7 years, and then moved to Canberra after that.
And what were you doing? What was your career? What were you doing?
Well, the first job I had in Melbourne was with the Department of Civil Aviation.
Okay.
In a clerical position. I wasn't any sort of engineering or anything like that. I have to say, in many ways, that was the most enjoyable career in my before I got into recreation. It wasn't a passion, but it was just. It wasn't that long after the war years, so it's dating me a bit. And well, mind you, by this time I'm 17, so 18. But it was. There were a lot of return service people working for civil aviation in those days, and it was a very professional department, but a lot of fun too. There were a lot of people who lived life and they were happy to enjoy life, and so as a young man, it was a fascinating introduction to the working world.
Great. I think we've got something alike and experiences there, because actually my first, not my first job. I've had jobs, knocking on doors and washing cars in the Netherlands as a young boy, trying to save some money to buy a leather jacket. But when we immigrated to Australia, I played the short-time soccer, professional soccer, unfortunately, in a motorbike accident, and I had to study from home. And I studied commercial bookkeeping. And that I did it for about 2.5 years, and I was getting better back on my legs again, able to walk again. And my first job was with Department of Communications, a government department.
Yeah.
And it's actually through an agency. Okay. And I must say, and it lasted for about 3.5 years in different departments. I worked through different agencies, but I must say the work environment was always pleasant, comfortable, and we enjoyed some of the overtimes. But it was a great experience, but also laid the foundations. And it relates a little bit to what you were saying before, staring at that window. Now, what's life all about? What I want to do. So just bring us to that moment, Peter. You were 30 years. Where were you? What was that moment like? What was going on in your mind and heart? What was going on?
Fascinating story, which I love telling, quite honestly.
Yes.
It goes back, I had, because clearly working in the government, and both in Melbourne and in Canberra, was a very predictable life. You had a settled job, things went on, you simply turned up at 8:45 and you left at 4:51, you know, and it was a very stable life. I was earning reasonable money both. By the time I got to Canberra, I was working in the National Treasury, which was but only in the training area.
Yeah.
That was, you know, of course, the Treasury being the Treasury, all you had to do was ring someone in another department and simply say, it's Nicholls from the Treasury here. And you could hear them stand to attention because the Treasury had this reverence about it that most other departments didn't have. But it was a very stable life. I was getting good money. I got married. We adopted some children. Life was going along, and I got to Canberra when I was about 24. So it was about 6 years before that age 30 thing occurred, which happened, where I was sitting there thinking, another 35 more years of this, which would be a retirement age, which we all expected to do. But there was another life. There was another life for me for work. My real passion was at the weekends. I had shown leadership qualities in sport from a very early age. I played field hockey.
Okay.
I started at the age of 14 and was immediately made captain of that team. I became assistant to the secretary very quickly because he asked me to write. It's interesting. My writing career began then. He said, "Peter, could you put in a report on your match each week, and we'll publish it in the club newsletter?" Yeah. I said, "Yes, I could do that." And so I duly wrote these, you know, dramatic reports about how exciting the game was and how we won it. And I must confess, I thought at one day of becoming a sports journalist. I just loved doing that. And fairly soon I became president of that club. And it just seemed to have that sort of quality about me, which people seemed to like. And so all that was happening in Melbourne when I first started. By the time I got to Canberra, I will say I joined one of the largest hockey clubs in Canberra and very quickly became president of that club. And later in my 12 years in Canberra, I also became competition secretary of the Australian Capital Territory Hockey Association. I was on the committee for the first national champions held in Canberra, and I had in many ways seen as a Mr. Hockey in Canberra. So on the weekends and away from work, the real me was living. And then along came, this is around the time of the Gough Whitlam government came into power in Australia. And Gough Whitlam had some very radical ideas about the world, what the world was all about. His government only lasted for 3 years because people decided that he was a bit too radical. But one of the things he said he wanted to do was, he said, leisure may well be the problem of the 1980s. And this pricked up my ears. I thought, this is interesting. I wonder what he means by that. One thing led to another, and the government set up various programs on how we can manage people when they're not at work, which appealed to me greatly. And I went along to a one-day seminar
Yeah.
And that seminar absolutely blew me away. I took copious notes. I was asking questions. I was so excited. I came home from work from the seminar that day, determined I was going to go down the street and do the new recreation planning graduate diploma course, which the government had established. Where did that course? Passed with flying colours, and that was it. And then I had to find a job. And
Beautiful,
so that was where we got to at that stage.
No, thank you for sharing, Peter. It's interesting that you're asking life at age 30, is this all that there is? And actually doors start to open now what could be, that leading to the next level of profession experience. So, but I think what's interesting, what you just shared here, is that the government said that how can we manage people? It's an interesting statement. Well, when we look at that statement or listen to that, what does that mean to you? Because I think that leads on to what we wanting to be free. Yeah.
It was certainly. I just personally think, not for political reasons, but for just the reasons you mentioned. Gough Whitlam got people thinking very differently.
Yeah.
His slogan was, "It's time. It's time to start change. It's time to think differently." And this excited me for all sorts of reasons, even before the leisure issue came up. This is the sort of man I like listening to.
Yes.
And as such, and he produced a lot of new social policies into Australia, which things like the single parents allowance, a single mother's allowance, lots of different changes he brought in. He went a little bit overboard, unfortunately, and people got a little bit worried about it. And he lost government fairly quickly under fairly dramatic circumstances. But he'd actually changed. He'd start the thinking. And
and I think that's important. And sometimes that one word or the one sentence that makes people think like Lou and yourself. And now, when we look at the statement, being controlled by systems or governed by something that it appears to be doing good, and with all respect, of course. And if we look at today, I mean, that was in the 80s, you're saying?
Yeah, well, it was actually the 70s. So,
yeah, 70s.
In the 70s, yep.
You're fast forwarding to 2023, the last 3-4 years, because you've experienced a lot too then. And do you sense that a lot of people still asking that question, that what is life all about? I don't like to be governed or controlled by what's controlling me. You still sense it?
I do. They weren't until they were in lockdown.
Yes.
They were running at 100 miles an hour, not looking past Friday. We all were. It was that sort of lifestyle. Running around everywhere, wondering where we were going, and then we just had to stop for literally weeks and sometimes months. We had no choice.
Yeah.
And as such, people were forced to stop and think, what's going on? What would I do with my life? I want to go, when are we going to go back to what pre-COVID was? And then people realised, actually, I don't want to go back to what pre-COVID was like. This is different. I've got a chance to rethink what I'm doing. So I had written a book called Enjoy Being You back in 2000, which was a reflection on my years in recreation planning about leisure. And I put a few paragraphs of that out online about what Enjoy Being You meant, and it attracted incredible interest because people were saying, "That's right, I want to start Enjoy Being Me."
Yes.
And they were ready for that sort of statement.
Beautiful. And
I was quite amazed.
I'm sitting here with a smile, but when you just shared that, and when I read that as well, free to be me, or I just want to be me, or I want to be doing what I love doing. I want to follow my interests. And a lot of people don't know the interest anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
It brought me back a little bit. As a child, we were born. Most children are born in a family of love. Okay, created out of love. You get to play in the sand, get to play in the car, with other children, and you get to discover and create. Okay, and you had a sense of freedom there to do things. Okay, and then suddenly we had to conform to pass and to be accepted. Yes, and we live a life between 5 to 25 like that, right, in study, and then we're hoping we get accepted, and etc. etc. But also during the process, what I sensed, a lot of people start to lose themselves of whom they are. Okay, they became that identity, what they should conform to.
Mm.
So there's a separation. Okay, and as a young boy, I tasted it already. I used to fall asleep at primary school because I was not stimulated. And people thought I was tired, but I was just not stimulated. It was not triggering my interest. It was being taught, unless we played sports.
That's right. Yes,
I enjoyed that. Yeah.
Yes,
So, yes,
you become recognised and valued away from work. You know,
yes.
If you're good at sport, even if you're just the best in your team, you know, you're recognised and you get little trophies, and you know, even and it's the taste of being valued for who you are.
Yeah, and people long for that. People long for that greatly, and still today, and even more so possibly today. Okay, because there's so many distractions, so many elements we need to conform to, from a digital perspective, from a system perspective. But like you said, and I think it is an important point, an interesting point as well. And 2020, things came to a halt. Yes. What went through your mind when this happened? Okay, and you're at a different stage of life than some other people. But what happened in your mind? What happened to you?
I guess there was what happened to me personally, and what happened to what I was doing in work-wise, different areas. What happened to me personally was, like all of us, everything just had to stop. I've been running workshops and public speaking, and suddenly you couldn't do that, and sort of a bit mystified where to go. But on the work side, I was helping people make the transition to what I called life after work. I didn't call retirement, because it was already clear then people did not want to retire.
I love this, life after work. I love it.
That's right. Retire was retire from life, which of course was the way it was viewed in those days, and still continues to be viewed that way in some stages too. But so we had this, and then of course once COVID hit, nobody was interested in the topic of retirement. So and I thought, you know, there's no point trying to push that issue, much as it was still, it wasn't a big issue. People were just simply stunned. And I think a turning point was one of the local people who, as I say, we were all stunned, and a number of us in business got together, and we had this a number of online little workshops once a week for about 6 weeks, trying to figure out what we're going to do.
Yes. And
I reckon that opened up this thing, a lot of what I do now, but this enjoy being the person you really are. Gary Edwards, who was a very dear friend of mine, was very good on developing visual models about what we do. And he helped me come up with the idea of an octagon which showed each of the 7 characteristics of what enjoying being you is all about. And that became the theme, and suddenly I found myself, and then, as I say, consistent with the reactions I was getting online for the Enjoy Being You theme, I found myself taking it away from simply the transition from before work to after work, to more the question of transition in life. And if I could just go on just a bit more than that.
Yeah, because I like that word, transition in life. Yes.
Yeah, because that was happening. I found we were going back to my example when I turned 30. Yes. I find all the big O's are actually quite a significant transition. I had mine at 30, my first one. Yes. Then there are people at 40, and particularly women who have got children off their hands and saying, I'm now free to do what I'd like to do. 40 was quite a significant age to a number of people. 50 was the traditional midlife crisis, and 60 was planning what to do after the rest of your life. So the big O's I found were all transitions, and I find myself to this day working with people not necessarily of a certain age, but have had a reasonable life and work experience. So the 30-somethings onwards, they're starting to rethink, why am I here? And I find that's the sort of person that's curious to understand themselves a lot better, and why are they on this earth at all? Were they there to earn money for the next 35 years and then quit work, or what? You know, that sort of thing.
Yes. I often think, and I'm 58 years young, and I often see life as a game now. Okay, and it took me many years to discover that. And okay, you may relate that to yourself. That everything seems to be gamified. I mean, if you look at innovation, startups, and I've been involved quite a bit intensely in different types of businesses here and predominantly overseas in Europe and Asia. But when you look at it from the out, you're able to step out. It's like looking outside the window and questioning life, or questioning what you're doing, what's happening around you, and looking at from life rather than from a system that we're involved in. Okay, you realize, hang on, we're just running around and playing and trying to create something or grow something, yes, or trying to show something that we're better than someone else. So we take a little bit from them so we can have more, so we can grow. And it's funny, but we seem to be going around in circles. And this leads me really, I suppose, a little bit more particular I want to talk about now. Again, I'll show you the book again for our listeners. Free to be me. When, at what year, what moment became this really important to you for you to share this message, Peter?
For me, I guess it was I guess in my latter years as a recreation planner, because what I had been learning through being a recreation planner was to observing how people lived their lives when they were not at work, how you saw a person really come to life. And I gradually, in those latter years, found myself saying, when you lose yourself in an interest you love, you find yourself. The real you comes to life. Now, so many people were finding that in their weekend and getting out and about, but then they'd come to work, and I was given an interesting statistic, which has been researched quite heavily, that when a person who simply loves the weekend but doesn't like goes into a structured work situation where they're employed by a boss, they would leave about 80% of all their skills at the office door, and they would only take through into the office what the office wanted, what the boss wanted, what the culture said, what the job specification said, and they just simply focused on that. And then when they left the office, they'd go back to doing the things and being themselves. So what I was realizing this, but it was at a stage of life, and this is why the book's about why a life ethic is replacing the work ethic, because the work ethic was saying, look, that's not a real, Peter, didn't have a real job for 50 years. I haven't had a real job since I left the Treasury in Canberra. And there's a little story in that too, we might come to a little later.
Yeah, please.
About the reactions I got there. Well, the reactions I got then were twofold. One was, Peter, that you're mad. You're going into a career that nobody's ever heard of in Australia. You're going to drop money to take it up the job, and you've got to be. You can't be serious, as one person once said. But the other one was, I wish I had your guts. I'd love to do what you're doing. There were these two different threats. Now,
well, hold on to that. Hold on.
Okay.
If I may, because you said, I wish I had the guts. Really what you're saying, I wish I had the guts, or what they were thinking and saying, live differently and follow what triggered your genuine interest. Okay, your dreams, your visions, what help you fulfill your life. And I think that that's very important, because it does take guts. It does take realizing what you're thinking and going through emotionally and thoughtfully, and be able to say, great, I want to make that decision. That's also for our listeners now, because there might be people listening to this recording, and they in that moment to transition, yes. Sometimes, hopefully, they know what direction to go to, yes. Or maybe they should they seek their inner selves and allow their dreams to come to life again and follow that direction. The intuition, they call it as well. But it's interesting you say that. But you already discovered that at a younger age, or doing your work in life. So hang on, I want to follow who I am. Okay, that fits better with me.
There are two words in that. One
Yes.
is courage and the other is fear.
Yes,
Because the person who said, I wish I had you, yeah, the leap of faith is one of fear.
yeah,
The courage is where I've found what I'm good at and I love it, and I know this is what I was meant to do. You don't know it's going to work out, but you have the courage to say,
yes.
I am prepared to follow what's happening because I can tell there is something in this that says, Peter, this is what you are meant to do. And you can't resist. You just go ahead and do it. And it seemed to work out too.
So would you say courage gave you the faith as well to move on, to move forward?
Yes, because
Beautiful.
you can see your own personal wishes of, in my case, some years before, starting to come to a, look, here's a way of expressing them, not just at the weekend. It must be what I'm meant to do. I don't know how it's going to be. I finished up. I didn't plan to come to Adelaide. I tried to get a job in Canberra and I couldn't get one straight away. I tried to get a job in Sydney, didn't get past even get called for an interview. Got interview, saw a job in Adelaide, came over, and the rest is history. But I was determined. Somewhere I'm going to get this job. I've done the course. I've got the qualification. And remember, I was married with two small children. My wife wasn't all that thrilled about the idea because she was born and bred in Canberra. She, because I'd been very involved in hockey, she made a proposition to me. She said, Peter, I'm prepared to come to Adelaide if you give up hockey. And I did, because I thought, yep, I see that's a fair, because I had done an awful lot in that stage, and the time was right to. I wasn't going to have time to be president of clubs and all this. I had a new career, and so therefore we came to that agreement, and that worked out well.
Yeah, actually, I'm just trying to think now. What were you thinking? Wondering, was it true love or was it logic? The decision.
Sorry, what's the question again?
What was it? Love? Okay, love for the wife. Okay, or was it the reasoning of logic? Okay, it makes sense to you. I'll do that then. Okay.
There was a wrestle of thinking there, because
yes,
my wife had married a stable government public servant.
Yeah.
And suddenly here he was finding his whole new career, and she had to come to terms with, this is the man who I've married, who has found his way in life, and my job is to be there and support him, which she did for. We're not together now, but for quite different reasons. It's and it was just I always thankful and admire and tell her, remind how she gave up a lot for me, and that was a fairly big thing, as it is for anyone. So I was always very appreciative of that.
So you're saying, pre-COVID, you're doing a lot of workshops and working with people, and were the foundations of that workshop about helping people to rediscover life, who they are? Yeah.
See, it's interesting. I often talk about purpose finds you rather than you find purpose.
Yes.
And in fact, so that as did happen when I went to I did the recreation, purpose found me and said, Peter, you're needed in this direction. Come on. And then eventually my recreation planning career came to an end. And there's no need to go into that, but various things happened which said, right, you won't be working as a recreation planner anymore. And I've got to say, my family were a little worried about me, because they knew how much I would love what I'd done, and suddenly I wasn't doing it anymore. But an interesting thing, purpose found me again in the form of a very dear friend who I'd worked with in the recreation planning area, was actually, she became a leader of a private enterprise, very hard planning business, not recreation planning. The whole area of planning, housing and communities and development and overseas planning and all sorts of things. She said to me, Peter, I've got a staff which are literally burning out. I've got 12, but we are traveling overseas regularly on projects, coming back, and they are workaholics. I'm trying to change the culture of the group, just a group of about 10 or 12 people. and she said, "I love your book, Enjoy Being You. Do you reckon you could run a workshop based on your book?" Well, I, of course, immediately said, "Yeah, sure, that I'd love to," and then walked away thinking, what have I done? I know nothing about burnouts. I'm an enjoyment man. How can I help?
Yes.
Nonetheless, she did say, based on your book. So I sat down and I got together an idea for 2 one-hour sessions with this group of 12 people to talk about work and leisure, to sort of say what the difference, what leisure meant and how it might help you in your work. It was fairly basic sort of stuff. And we had these 2 one-hour sessions a week apart. And this friend of mine said, "Look, I'll tell you a bit about each of the people who are involved." She gave me a bit of a rundown on each of them. One of whom she said, "This guy's a bit of a loner. He doesn't say he works. He's a good worker, but he doesn't talk to the other staff much. He just gets on with his job, and he's very quiet." And she said, "So you might have to sort of work with him, see how you get on with him." Anyway, at the end of the 2 one-hour sessions a week later, the second week, the group was so wrapped up in what I'd said that they said, "Look, we've got together. We want to give you a gift as well as the fee," which we agreed on. And the part that I've always loved and remember is who represented the group to give me the thing was the loaner, because what had happened is, during the discussions, I had asked people what they enjoyed for leisure and was getting, fairly non-interested results, till the loaner opened up and said, "I actually like playing chess." And I thought, so I probed him a bit further about, tell me more about what you like about chess. And for about 5 minutes, we got into quite a back and forth about chess, because I'd played a little bit, at home with the kids and all that myself. And the comment I got afterwards was they had never heard him say so much in at one time. And it changed the culture of the interaction between him and them, so that when he did the presentation on behalf of the group, I thought this was the most amazing change that I brought about simply by talking about enjoyment and leisure. So I now know what I've got to do. I've got to become a life enjoyment mentor. I didn't use that name for quite a while, but that's where it all started to trigger. I had found purpose again, and off I went.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I think that was around 2003, if I read
That's right, about 2003. Yes, yep.
Wow, which is only a short time ago. If you look at it,
right.
20 years, and so much we've experienced since then, and you would have been exposed as well, and all the changes. So now, and I'm just thinking, because people are listening, okay, free to be me. Now, what does that mean, or how do I do that? And let's look at a 20, 25-year-old. They're in the midst of studies, or some even finish a little bit earlier, may go into the workforce or business. What would you suggest to the younger generation, that generation younger than us, now the early 20s, how to become and be me? Some to talk about authenticity, okay, which is very big today, but being authentic. So, but what could a person do now to become me at a young age?
There are 2 different scenarios that we need to discuss to come to an answer to that. When you are first in that, and the very early stages of preparing for work and getting your first job, is very different to the person who honestly I deal more with, the person who's been in the life for a while and has now started to learn something about themselves and about who they are, and they would like to find out how they can apply that better than they have. But to go back to the board you're talking about, it's more about the education system, because the education system has been designed to rewrite reading, writing, and arithmetic to get a classic job, to go to university, to become a doctor, a lawyer, a engineer, whatever that might be, and also not only that, but no matter what the adolescent says, look, I'd love to become a drummer, an artist, a singer, an actor, a recreation planner. These are people as a bit of a, that's a lovely idea, but you're never going to get any money doing that. You need to think about a much more classic job that everyone will respect you for, So you've had it drummed into you back in my era. This is where it's very different, because I appreciate, and I be honest enough not to know enough about the 20 to 25-year-olds today, because they are now open-minded about, I do what I feel I want to do. They may still need the help to work out what that is, but they are resisting any education system which says you stick to your knitting and just be good at these certain things, because and I will say this, the education system is changing, but the philosophy behind what it means, and this is what I talk about really, is it's more about the public beliefs, the public perceptions about life. Those don't happen as fast as all this does. The public perception is still very much living in 20th century principles for a 21st century life, or even a 19th century principles. And it's a bit like everything. It's like passing laws in government. It's like legal things. They drag along behind what's actually happening. So whereas people might be recognizing, look, life's very different to all that, the system is still saying, yeah, this will all settle back down again. Don't get too carried away with what's happening. You know, we'll come back to what it was, where you'll need to have a good, stable life. No, that's not happening. So, but it is this shift of 20th century thinking, like retirement. People are still discussing, I don't want to retire. It doesn't happen. It's a perception. It's not a fact about stopping growing at 65, stopping growing at about your age at 58. You should be stopping growing. You should be up here now, and then down the hill, slide, and off you go. Doesn't happen, but the public perception still says that.
Yes. And that comes back to the statement you made before about controlling people. Okay. And it's consciously or subconsciously, it's still being preached in many ways out there as well, because it's a sense of false security, if I may say that. And Peter, I appreciate you sharing and your honesty as well. So I can't look into the 20-year-olds of generation today and they're starting the first job and what they're going through. But what we do see, and you rightly say so, they are more open to speak about what they've been exposed to, or they may question it more.
Yep, you too.
Right?
We didn't question, did we?
No. It depends on the culture. I was brought up in the Netherlands. So when we immigrated, I was 15 when I arrived here. In the Netherlands, at primary school already, we were asked to share how we would feel. Doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. Okay, but we were allowed to express ourselves. And when we came from the Netherlands to Australia in 1980, 15, as I shared, is that now you exposed and introduced to a new culture, and a multiculture as well. Now the Netherlands is multiculture. In Australia, then we had the Italians, the Greeks. Then I met some beautiful indigenous people as well here in LA City, in Victoria Square. And Polish people and Vietnamese people I met, and I played football or soccer with. And now these people came here, and many that came here, this is a lucky country. This is the lifestyle. We had the weather, we had the freedom, and we sense it as well. Okay, so but when we spoke about how we would feel at school, what was taught at my school in the Netherlands, that wasn't always or was not experienced. I'm not to say not welcome, but wasn't experienced. Okay, but it's so important to be able to express who you are and how you feel and how you interpret a certain experience. So, and that's what makes me wonder. When I started reading your book, and I only started reading it a couple of days ago, and I got a long way to go. Okay. But free to be me is that I sense many are seeking that today, okay? And that may sometimes mean to be courageous enough, as you said, and have the faith to follow your intuition or follow your direction of interest. And what I like about you, Peter, is that you work within the governing services as well as a life coach or life mentor, okay? So you work for a boss within a structure which you enjoyed, and to flourish into be something different. Okay, so for any listeners out there, you don't always need to run a business to be free. Okay, you can be free within the business. So as long as they allow you to express yourself and blossom. Yes. And maybe find that business or environment to place yourself there.
One of the factors
Yes,
which is happening now, of course,
yeah.
is that the person who actually would direct the staff is
Yeah.
as confused about life as the staff themselves. We are all at the same level again.
Yes, yeah, well, playing level. I like that. So true.
Nobody knows what the real answers are. So everyone from the boss downward is sort of struggling with what's the best thing to do. And I think this is causing, so this actually helps the shift, because the boss, him or herself, is saying, is this what I want to keep on doing?
Yeah.
So it's where, and like I said, the organisation chart, instead of being like that or like that, it's now pretty much like that, all on an equal level, saying we are all still in it together, like that expression we used in COVID. We are still all in it together, and what the heck we're going to do with this new post-COVID life? It's
and many are searching. Although here we got artificial intelligence, machine learning. You hinted a little bit in your book as well. Now you're aware of it, but many of us still don't understand it.
I don't either.
The one preaches, no, we are gonna be controlled by artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Okay, but our sense, it still will always be a tool. Okay, because we still have a decision where it's implemented, how it's used. Okay, it's interesting enough, even with certain conversations I have or business proposals, when I write them, is that I use ChatGPT to help me form a good offer, a letter with some key prompts in there. It's quite interesting. The education system, you hinted about the education system, machine learning, artificial intelligence, with all the available data and the conclusions that may give you a potential answer or direct you towards a good answer. Okay, we can use ChatGPT. It's amazing. We can create art. Okay, we can see the creators. You spoke about the creators before, an artist, a musician who wants to play music for a living, possibly. Okay, technology has given new life, to the creators. And I think when we truly ask ourselves, who am I, or no, free to be me, we are all creators in many ways. We want to create and be of value, yes, to somewhere, to someone, to an organization. And I mean, this is what the wildlife ethic is replacing the work ethic, and this is what that's what I liked about your book. So, Peter, is that we are 2023. We are living in, the economy is changing, and depending where you live and which country, but the economy is changing. Yes, Australia is changing. What do you see we will experience? Over the next 5 to 10 years, or between now and 2030, what do you sense we're going to be experiencing?
A continuing drive for searching for purpose and reason, because purpose is what it's all about. And if people have been living, and there are actually, broadly speaking, there are two groups of people: those who have found purpose in their life, but perhaps may need to adjust it according to the changing circumstances. And those who have not yet found purpose, they've simply been going through the work ethic principles of, I've got a job, it pays every second Thursday, I've got to rethink things. I'm a bit scared because I realise that I am now my own boss. I don't have a boss saying to me, Peter, you will, stick with us, because in 1 year's time you'll get a promotion, 2 years' time you'll get another promotion, and we've got you in mind for this job or that job. That sort of thinking is now questionable. I won't say it won't exist, but it's questionable. So I think there is now a sense of wanting to know what my purpose is, and I have a process, and it's actually the process that I've been evolving since that first burnout workshop. I've continued to manage and evolve this process, which says, look, you've got to look within yourself over the rest of your life. You've got to look for the dots that actually have brought you to where you are. What were the things that made you really good, and what were the things you just had to do anyway because it was all part of the process? And I take people back to as far back as those adolescent years. Someone who is in their 50s has to think back very hard about, what was it you loved doing and why? It's not what you love doing, but why did you love doing what you did? Be it at the work, at home, at weekend, at recreation. There were things you loved doing, but why? I help people work through the why they did it. And I find in the courses that it triggers something about who they really are and who they've always been. Because I work on the basis that all those natural abilities that you were born with and the gifts and talents, you've probably used them at various stages of your life, and they've become what I call your transferable skills.
Yeah.
I mean, transferable skills is a well-known expression, but when you put it in the context of what your lifetime transferable skills have been, like I used to lead the hockey team at 14. I used to write journals at 14. These were things I were good at. Fortunately, in my way, and that didn't happen until many years later. I really started to learn how to write and come up with 4 books now. But it all goes back. We've all got that within us, and what happens is we tended to often had to squash it down.
Yeah.
Workers said, "Look, we don't have time for that. I've had to let that all go because I've got to earn money and live in an economic world that demands money for success." But now people are coming back to your point about what happens in the next 5 years. People now have the opportunity to actually reflect on what's brought them to where they are and what does that tell them about themselves.
Yeah.
I have, if I could just top that off with 3, there are 3 things I suggest people need to look at. What are you good at? What do other people value about you? And you might have to talk to a few people about that.
Yeah.
And what makes you different?
Yeah.
What makes you different to everybody else? Because we are all different. But if you can find by looking back over your life that what I know I was always good at, and that's not a simple thing to answer. What other people value about me? Not simple to answer, but it's better than saying my identity is my work, and when I leave work, that's it, I'm finished.
Yeah.
So, and all of this is going to become more and more in the melting pot over the next 5 years.
Yeah, great. And I'm so much aligned with that. Is that because we've been running often a lifestyle duality, 2 identities, or the me and the identity we've conformed to become. Okay, and that we recognize for it. And sometimes it can be pleasant, it can be struggling and rewarding, or draining, or whatever it may be. So, but it's we are living in times where, and I mentioned before, but the economy is changing, but technology and machine learning certainly will have a big impact, but that will also give us the opportunity, like I said, to question ourselves. Now, who am I? Now, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? No, or maybe that time when you were the 30, okay, do I want to continue doing this? Okay, what other options are available? I think that people are coming to a stage as well now, which is so glad to see and hear, is that they are even questioning or having a conversation with their boss, their employer. I'd like to do something different, or those working hours or this type of work, it doesn't really fit me, or I'm open to do more than what I do. Okay, the multi-skilled, okay, or that with wellness is becoming more and more important, okay, today, and it's not a frowned upon anymore. Now, you spoke about your soft skills. Now, what are your natural softs or your skills? Okay, your emotional intelligence, which is never spoken about, and you as a life coach and life mentor, and that probably ignite this a lot. Now, about emotional intelligence, it's a beautiful thing. It's very powerful, okay, and it's very valuable as well. So it's now, I think we've been chatting about 45 minutes or so. So
time flies.
and I'm enjoying this conversation. And again, now when I post this video online, I will put in links in there as well for the book Free to Be Me. Okay, and just in closing our conversation here, is that and you already asked or mentioned 3 points, but what would be the 3 takeaways? Yes, the closest conversation to give to people, yes, that will help them to become free?
And it's for some people, that's very easy to do. But for a lot of people, it's recognizing that everything you're good at is been with you all your life, that you go back to the basics of who you are and have always been, that you live in a world that is changing so fast that you need to say, I can't change that fast, but you don't need to. You know you've got skills that you've gradually developed over the years that you need to reflect on, go back. I love Steve Jobs's assertion about you cannot connect the dots looking ahead, but you can connect the dots looking back. So that when you go back and look at what are significant things that happened in your life that have brought you to where you are today, what have been the good things that you've always enjoyed? Because enjoyment actually is so much more than just having fun. Enjoyment is actually drives the energy that gives you life. Because when you do enjoy anything, be it at work or at home or wherever, coming alive generates energy that drives your life forward and gives you that, takes you in the direction of why you were born to here. So don't dismiss the things you enjoyed, value them, and really get back to your 20s, your 30s, your 40s. What are the things you've enjoyed, and maximize those? Because when you lose yourself in an interest you love, you do find you're the real you.
Oh, beautiful. Peter, I want to thank you for your time and to discover more about you. Again, like I said, I'll share some information below this recording here in the description. Again, it's given the opportunity to be able to purchase the book from you as well. And now I'm looking forward to further conversations with you.
Yes, I too. I'll totally enjoy that.
I'll stop the recording as we speak, but please feel free to hang on for a moment.